Imagine a plan so ambitious it was buried in classified files for decades, waiting to be uncovered. Project Horizon began in the late 1950s as a bold vision to establish humanity's first permanent outpost on the moon. Military planners believed that reaching beyond Earth wasn't just possible, it was necessary. What they proposed would astonish even today's engineers. This is the story of dreams that soared far ahead of their time. The blueprints were staggering. Project Horizon called for a fully operational lunar base by 1966, complete with living quarters, power systems, and room for 12 people. Engineers designed cylindrical modules buried beneath the surface to shield crews from radiation. They planned dozens of rocket launches to ferry supplies and materials. It reads like science fiction, yet every detail was calculated by real scientists who genuinely believed humanity could live among the stars. So why did nobody hear about it? The plan was deemed too costly and too risky for its era, requiring resources far beyond what any government would commit. As priorities shifted toward the broader space race, Project Horizon quietly faded into forgotten archives. For years, its documents remained hidden, dismissed as an impossible fantasy. Yet the ideas within them never truly died. They simply waited for a future bold enough to embrace them. Today, Project Horizon feels remarkably prophetic. Space agencies and private companies are once again planning lunar bases, echoing those decades-old dreams. The vision that once seemed impossible now guides genuine missions to build a lasting human presence on the moon. It reminds us that bold ideas rarely fade. They inspire the generations who follow. So keep dreaming big, because tomorrow's reality often begins as yesterday's secret plan. Every secret leaves a financial fingerprint. Researchers tracing shell corporations found millions funneled through obscure foundations, all leading toward a single unnamed initiative in the early 70s. The funds vanished into projects with harmless names: media studies, behavioral research, communications infrastructure. Individually, they seemed innocent. Together, they formed a pattern too precise to be accidental. Someone was building something vast, hidden in plain sight, financed by money nobody could easily trace. The first circle of the diagram was observe. Insiders believed this phase involved collecting information on ordinary citizens, long before the digital age made it easy. Surveys, focus groups, subscription lists, purchasing habits. Harmless data, gathered relentlessly, then fed into early computers filling entire rooms. The goal was not to catch criminals. The goal was to understand people, to map their fears, their desires, their weaknesses, and once you understand someone, you can begin to move them. Documents suggest Horizon's researchers weren't studying individuals. They were studying populations. They wanted to know how ideas spread, how panic ignites, how belief becomes contagious. They tracked rumors like scientists tracking a virus. One fragment described predicting public reaction to events before they happened with unsettling accuracy. If true, someone learned to forecast the moods of entire nations, and knowledge like that is far too tempting to leave sitting quietly on a shelf. The second circle was influence. This is where Horizon stopped watching and started acting. According to the fragments, subtle experiments were conducted through newspapers, radio, and later television. Not lies exactly, but carefully chosen emphasis. Which stories ran first? Which words appeared in headlines? Which fears were quietly amplified? The public never felt manipulated because nothing was ever false. They were simply nudged, gently, endlessly, toward conclusions someone else had chosen for them in advance. How do you steer millions without anyone noticing? You don't shout, you whisper. Horizon's method relied on repetition and timing. Plant a phrase, then let it echo across channels until it feels like common sense. By the time an idea reaches your dinner table, it seems like your own. That was the genius and the horror of it. Nobody resists an opinion they believe they invented themselves. The perfect manipulation leaves no fingerprints at all. One recovered memo referenced something called the Ashford test. In a single mid-sized city, researchers allegedly ran a controlled experiment, seeding a minor false concern through local media and measuring how fast it spread. Within 11 days, the entire community believed a threat that never existed. Then, just as quietly, they let it fade. The residents never knew they'd been part of an experiment. Ashford, if it happened, was only the beginning of something larger. For years, Horizon reportedly operated in the shadows, refining its methods. But something changed in the late 1980s. A new memo, more urgent in tone, warned that the tools were becoming too powerful for their creators to control. One line stands out chillingly: "We can no longer guarantee where influence ends and reality begins." Even the architects of Horizon had started to fear the machine they had built. The third and final circle was control. This is where the trail turns truly dark. If Observe was watching and influence was steering, then control meant something absolute. The fragments here are fewer, deliberately destroyed. But one surviving phrase suggests the goal was a self-sustaining system, one that shaped opinion automatically, without human oversight. A machine designed to manage belief the way a thermostat manages temperature: quiet, constant, and utterly invisible to those living inside it. Who built Project Horizon? The names remain frustratingly obscure. A small circle of academics, strategists, and financiers who moved between institutions like ghosts. They never held public office. They never sought fame. They understood that real power hides. One researcher believes they saw themselves not as villains, but as guardians, convinced the public could not be trusted to govern itself. So they decided to guide it, silently, for what they told themselves was the greater good. By the early 2000s, Project Horizon seemed to disappear entirely. The foundations dissolved, the offices emptied, the names scattered. Officially it had never existed, so officially nothing had ended. But researchers who study these things noticed something troubling. The methods didn't vanish. They spread, as if Horizon had never truly stopped, but simply dissolved into the broader machinery of the modern world, blending so completely that we can no longer separate it out. Here is the unsettling possibility. What if Horizon succeeded so completely that we live inside its results? The endless streams of content, the trends that appear from nowhere, the outrage that flares and dies on cue. We assume these things are random, organic, natural. But what if some of them are not? What if the invisible hand described decades ago never left, but only grew more sophisticated, more seamless, and infinitely harder to detect? Now, a fair mind must pause here. Where is the hard proof? Much of what we have are fragments, testimonies, and patterns that could be coincidence. Skeptics argue that Horizon is a myth, a story that grew in the retelling, and they may be right. But consider this. The best designed secret would look exactly like a myth. Deniable, absurd, easy to laugh away. Sometimes the loudest ridicule guards the quietest truth. Remember the technician who found that folder? Weeks after his discovery, he reached out to a journalist, promising to share everything he'd saved. They arranged to meet. He never arrived. His apartment was found empty, his devices wiped, his photographs gone. Authorities called it a voluntary disappearance. His family disagreed. Whatever he uncovered on that forgotten server, someone considered it dangerous enough to act. And that, perhaps, is the most convincing evidence of all. A few documents survive, copied before the vanishing, passed carefully from hand to hand. They circulate now in the quiet corners of the internet, dismissed by most as fabrication. Yet they share strange consistencies. The same handwriting, the same phrases, the same chilling logic. Nobody has ever proven them fake. Nobody has ever proven them real. They simply exist, waiting, like a warning left behind by people who wanted someone, someday, to finally understand. So, what do we do with all this? Perhaps Project Horizon was nothing more than a fever dream. a coincidence dressed as a conspiracy. Or perhaps it was exactly what it claimed to be, a plan to shape human thought, still running quietly beneath the surface of our lives. Either way, the mere possibility should change how you consume information. Question the sources. Notice the patterns. Ask who benefits when you believe something without asking why. Project Horizon was named for a reason. A horizon is a line you can see but never reach, always ahead, always shifting. Maybe that was the point. A goal without end, a control without limit, a plan nobody was ever supposed to find. Now you have found it. What you do with that knowledge is yours alone. But remember, the moment you stop questioning is the moment someone else begins deciding for you.